So welcome back, everyone. We will continue with today's sessions. Before we continue, I would like to remind you that this event offers live simultaneous interpretation in English and Spanish, since some sessions will be presented in English and others in Spanish. So if you haven't done so yet, we encourage you to activate the interpretation feature by selecting your preferred language using the glove icon that you can find at the bottom of your Zoom window. Bienvenidos nuevamente a todos. Antes de continuar, les recordamos que este evento cuenta con interpretación simultánea en español e inglés, ya que algunas presentaciones irán en inglés y otras en español. Si aún no lo han hecho, pueden activar el servicio de interpretación seleccionando el idioma de su preferencia en el icono del mundo que se encuentra en la parte inferior de la ventana de Zoom. El icono es similar al que estamos viendo ahora en pantalla. So now I'll switch again to English. And now let's move on to our next session. Now we will focus on the strategies and regulatory framework for Argentina's foreign trade. Understanding the country's trade policies and regulation is essential for companies looking to do business in Argentina, whether through export, import, or strategic partners. And for that, we are pleased to welcome Carolina Cuenca. She's the Undersecretary of Foreign Trade at the Ministry of Economy of Argentina, who will be leading this presentation. Carolina, thank you so much for being here with us today. It's a real pleasure that we can get to understand a little bit more about the Argentinian context in terms of trade. So now the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Luciano. Thanks for the invitation. It's my pleasure being here with you all today. I will try to make some introduction on what has been happened in Argentina regarding all the changes that has been made in the international trade field. The first of all, maybe I would start with where we were before President Milei comes to this administration. You should remember that probably Argentina was one of the most closed economies in the world. Importing in Argentina was really difficult. We had systems of non-automatic licensing. We have trade barriers, non-trade barriers. If you take into account all these barriers, and to that you add the fact that it was almost impossible to pay the imports to the providers abroad, it was like an almost unreal situation. There were no countries at all that were facing these kind of situations in the whole world. With this new vision, the first thing that the president put into the text of a decree was decree number 70, in which we can translate it into a very famous phrase that it is prohibited to prohibit. And this was like the main and the first step in our normalization process of the international trade in Argentina. Everything that we have been doing is just a normalization process. That's how we call it inside the government, because everything that we should do, at least at first, was to do everything that our neighbors, our Latin American countries were doing, that it was importing and exporting with normal parameters in Argentina. The first things that we did was to eliminate all the licensing process in Argentina. We have no more automatic and non-automatic licenses for import in Argentina. And then we tried to normalize, which was the most difficult process that we had to face, that it was normalizing the payments of imports in Argentina. Just for you to know, first, we had to make a kind of report because Argentina didn't know how much was owing to providers abroad by imports. So after this kind of report, we realized that Argentine companies had a debt of more than 50 billion US dollar. This is a unique case in the whole world. There was no country that has this situation before us. And it was really tricky because we received a central bank with negative reserves for more than 11 billion. So we need to pay to importers, to exporters of other countries for more than 50 billion, with the central banks with no reserves at all. We start normalizing this process. At first, we had different mechanisms with the central bank in which SMEs companies were allowed better mechanisms for payment than big companies. We stated a bonus for of the central bank for fronting this payment, who has different series. This long process that took us for more than a year, as you know, has ended a few days ago with the complete normalizing of the cepo. We got out of the cepo, and that was the news of all the newspapers here in Argentina and even in some international newspapers. But it was, I think, the most defiant issue that we had to face during the administration so far. Regarding the rest of the international trade, once we take out the licenses system, and once we start solving the payment of the debt, we start working on mechanism to normalize the payments of the imports made after the administration of the president came into the government. So after December 2023, we start creating new mechanisms to normalizing. So at the very first beginning, imports by January 2024 were being paid in four different payments: 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, and 120 days. That wasn't the best situation for importing in Argentina, because providers abroad didn't trust us anymore, because our debt of more than 50 billion was almost 1 year without paying imports from here. But that at that point we start working a different process together with the central bank that allow us to step out of the cepo a few days ago. Then we start working on eliminating regulatory barriers. In Argentina, we had more than 50 internal regulations that they were supposed to regulate the standard qualities and processes in Argentina. And when we start making some kind of revision of all of them, we realized that more than half of them had no sense at all, and that the rest of the world weren't taking into consideration those kind of regulations. So we eliminate 30 of them, and we try to focus on the rest of them, such as electrical security, construction materials, toys, I don't know, and some others that should stay alive, work effectively and quickly. One of the first movements that we made there at that point was that we didn't we didn't force companies to have the approval regulation before importing in Argentina, so that customs, when the merchandises arrive, had to verify the accomplishment of the standard regulation or quality regulation that was in Argentina. So now every kind of control regarding standard regulations are made after the import has happened in Argentina. Our custom has no more control capacity when arriving the merchandise or the items in Argentina, and the controls are being made only by the Secretary of Commerce after the imports has occurred. So what are we trying to do in Argentina, besides normalizing this kind of operation, is that we don't have any more barriers, non-tariff barriers for importing in Argentina. One point was the licensing systems. It doesn't exist anymore. Today, for importing in Argentina, you have nothing to do, nor just a declaration. You just have to make the proper procedures at the customs systems. And then the regulatory procedures in which we set up only the regulations that we made into force because they affect security of the people or environmental issues. And the moment of the control are not longer prohibiting imports or delaying imports in Argentina, but to speed them and controls of this kind of regulations always happens after customs procedures and when the companies has the merchandise in their companies. Another thing that we took into a very careful situations was is related with export duties. As you know, probably all of you know, we have been reducing or eliminating export duties on different sectors of economy. We have some others still going on, but we will continue working on that. There has been our last announcement made by our ministry last week regarding industrial sectors export duties. And some important considerations has to do with import duties. In Argentina, Argentina has high taxes for import duties, and this has maybe part of the explanation within the Mercosur. We cannot decide import duties on our own. We are part of Mercosur, and we have different mechanisms to decide import duties through different the management of different list of import duties. But what we noticed when we arrived to the government was that a lot of these lists were not properly managed. What can I say with this? For example, we have some national list of exceptions in which we have only 100 items in which we can low down import duties. And when we start looking at the list that we received, we noticed that, for example, there were some items in which Argentina has a very low import, and that we were using one of this 100 exemption list with a product that has no such an impact in our economy. So we start making a review of all these items, trying to optimize the benefit of these 100 that we have. And the same happened with capital goods, with technology items, informatic items, and we start a general review of this list, and we start working on reducing import duty basically on raw materials for production industries in Argentina, and on some items in which Argentine consumers were paying 5x or 4x the price that our neighbors in the region were paying. Maybe another consideration that impacts brutally in international trade in Argentina has to do with taxes in general. Argentina has the tax pressure in Argentina is really high. So we start working in a lot of measures that try to slow to takes down the tax pressure in Argentina. Probably the main measure that we took regarding this was known as the país tax, that it was finally eliminated by December last year, and really had a huge impact on import and even on export, taking into consideration that most of our production sectors need at least one raw material or product for the production. Um, Maybe we should talk about some negotiation processes in which we are involved. The international trade under secretary has to work jointly with our Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the negotiating process of Argentina. Within the Mercosur, we finalized last year our agreement with the European Union. We are now facing the process of approvals in the European Union and even in Mercosur uh, countries. We are supposed to have some final agreement approved by the end of this year, but it was a long process, and now we are facing negotiations with the Arab Emirates. We finalized another agreement with Singapore, and we are now starting some other negotiations with some Latin Central American countries. We cannot stop thinking about what is happening in this regard with the general world, but specifically with the new tariff of Trump's administration, reciprocal tariff, which are being a huge concern globally for all the countries, and Argentina is not an exception. We are having a wide dialogue with our US colleagues, and we are working really hard on this topic, but it is a very big important issue that today we are facing. Then another important changes that we faced last year and this year was regarding the dumping. We stated a decree and recently a new regulation in which we try to have a simplification of the process by eliminating the need for multiple files to be processed in different areas of the government and different agencies. We aim concretely to debureaucratization of administrative procedures. We cannot stop mentioning that only the National Commission for Foreign Trade um, was processing cases. Before now, also there were some areas in the Secretary of Commerce, and we have some double command in conducting this kind of investigation, and that was the result of that was that an investigation of dumping took more than 1 year and a half. So we face huge changes in this regard, and the second probably issue that we try to change in at this point was that in Argentina we had dumping measures for more than 20 years. So it's really impossible to have this kind of measures because they didn't attend a dumping situation really, but they were happening to become a non-tariff barrier. So if you consider high import duties, the regulations of standard quality regulations, and you add dumping measures, plus non-automatic and automatic licensing system in Argentina, plus avoiding the payment of import, the result of this was that in Argentina it was almost impossible to import, or it was really expensive. So the dumping decree of our president came to solve bureaucracy in the investigations of dumping, and short-term measures. Now in Argentina, you cannot have a dumping measure for more than 3 years, and only one possibility of renew it for 2 years maximum. That means that no dumping measure in Argentina will be for more than 5 years total. Then I think that's I have some notes here for me. Probably I should mention one of our last measures. This was regarding used capital goods. This is really important because we cannot consider attracting investments in Argentina if the capital goods are not being allowed to be imported freely. And regarding used capital good, are a special topic of importance when you are talking about investment, for example, in the area of energy or mining, in which used capital goods are one of the key issues. In Argentina, we have some regulation that was from 1994, and it was, as any other fields that I have already mentioned, it was almost impossible to import used capital goods in Argentina. So what we have done through the decree of the President 273 of 2025 was to eliminate the procedure that in which you need in which you need to have an approval of the government for every particular case in which you were in need of importing this kind of goods. And we convert that into a rule of our customs system. So in the new decree, we went wide in the range of the capital goods that are now allowed to be imported in Argentina. We reduced the prohibition, but besides that, and I think that's the most important part, we eliminate the procedures in which we here at the Secretary of Commerce were evaluating case by case and issuing approvals or denegating proceedings and authorization case by case. So now we have a wider universe of items of capital goods that are allowed to be imported in the use condition in Argentina. We reduce the number of prohibitions. We eliminate all kind of procedures for authorization in the Secretary of Commerce, and we have now this as a rule in our customs system. So this also gives transparency to the system. Now you have an annex, you know what you can import in Argentina and what you cannot in a use condition, and then you go directly to the customs system, and if you are allowed to do it, then you do it. These kind of measures, we work them very closely with the Ministry of Deregulation, Mr. Sturzenegger, which is also very well known for the measures and the kind of work that he does every day. But I think that we are really going through a transformation of the international trade sector in Argentina. Argentina has import licenses since the 90s, and this is the very first time in which we don't have any more license systems to import in Argentina. And we are eliminating bureaucracy in every field that we face in which you have to import or export in Argentina. From 1.5 years, we have eliminated more than 100 procedures. And this is the key issue if we want to export. You need to import if you want to export more. That's no doubt. All the countries that are growing in export, they are also growing in import, and it's impossible to grow in one field if you cannot grow in the other. And the second key issue regarding this is investment. Argentina has been working really hard in the investment field, I could listen the final part of the previous talk, and it was also about that. And if you have into consideration the five sectors in which Argentina can lead globally, which are mining, energy, agri-food business, services, and tourism, it is impossible to start growing in those sectors if we are not talking about import freely in Argentina. We have a lot of issues to still working on. We know that we still have to low down the tax pressure in Argentina. We are working really hard on that. We have some, I would say, some of the most defining issues ahead, which are regarding labor reforms and tax reform that requires the approval of our Congress, but we are working really hard on that. And I could probably continues mentioning, sorry, like, I don't know, 100 and some 20 more measures that aims like to local and very focused problems that companies from Argentina and even from other countries were telling us that they have to solve. But I think that probably the most important measures were already mentioned. I mean, a lot of measures of international trade were also thought to like a complement to the general economy plan of Argentina, which has three phases, and our minister has been talking a lot about that. For example, I don't know, I could mention one of our last measure that was regarding hybrid and electric vehicles in Argentina, in which we eliminated the import duties in vehicles of those sectors up to 18 US 18 I'm sorry, 16,000 US dollar, and that's because we are trying also to look for measures that through the normalizing of international trade can be part of a more economic plan, in which we look, for example, that 45 million of people in Argentina pay less for some items. The same happened when a few days ago, we reduced import duties on the textile sector, because Argentinian people is paying up to 10 times the price for clothing, for example. So uh, we are part of a big economic plan in which we are inserted. We try to look for measures that not only normalize international trade in Argentina, but also be part of going down with inflation, um, having more import and having more exports on Argentina by reducing not only import duty, but also eliminating or reducing export duties. There are a lot of things that we still have to work. We have more than, I would say, 3,000 items in which we should still work on reducing import duties. But as I was saying, we are part of the economic general plan. Our biggest priority is the equilibrium of our public accounts, and that's the supreme uh, objective that we have, and that's the only explanation of why we still reduce the rest of the import duties on items that are still high. Finally, I would say that we are facing a lot of new plans, of modernizing plans of the Mercosur. We have to have that conversation with our colleagues of Mercosur. This is Brazil, Uruguay, and Paraguay, and now Bolivia, who is still facing the incorporation to the Mercosur. But I think that should be an imperative objective for this year for Argentina. We are having now the presidency, and we are trying to put the focus on that. We have mechanisms that are really stopping us for growing, in my opinion, because of the kind and the mechanisms for deciding that we have. So the first objective is with that we need to modernize Mercosur mechanism decisions from the 90s, that we didn't have that conversation. And if we take into consideration the ideological and the different processes of reforms that our countries go through by the years, it's really impossible to continue as we are now. We need to change the mechanism through which, if we want to negotiate with a third country, we need the full consensus, because we face different times and situations inside our countries. We have different law, we have different lobbies. These ones understood as a positive lobbies, not the negative ones. So we are working really hard inside Mercosur. We want to be part of Mercosur. That's an important consideration, or an important message that I would try to leave here. We want to be part of Mercosur, but we need to be more flexible in the way we decide. We have to be more flexible in the way we negotiate with third countries, trying to do that with the ones that are likely to negotiate like us, and to leave the countries who wants to negotiate with third countries when one country that doesn't want to be part of it. So I would say that the work that needs to be done inside Mercosur is really hard, but we are having very good dialogues with our colleagues, and we have been, I would say, starting discussing important situations like the general tariff that we have within the four countries, which are the highest of the Mercosur, has the highest duties of the world when considered as a bloc. We start considering how we have to negotiate with our country. We start considering how we take decisions regarding the list. There were the last ministers encounter has, as a result, that the national list of exceptions grows in 50 positions to every country. So I think that Mercosur has a known depth of discussing these issues, because they are so important, and from the 90s that we didn't do it, and because of the global situation demands us to discuss that. What is happening with the Trump tariff, the reciprocal tariff, I would say the war commercial that is happening like constantly with a lot of countries abroad, demands that Mercosur and Argentina can be more effective and quick on the responses that can give. So I would say that that's a short presentation about what we have been doing, what our objective or goals ahead, and maybe we can open to some questions if we have.
Yeah, I know that 30 minutes was not enough for all the large amount of transformations we are seeing, and the work being undertaken by the Undersecretary of Foreign Trade. It's truly understanding. So I would like to thank you, Carolina, and your entire team. As we've seen today, everyone here in the audience, these reforms are already making a difference, and they were designed with one clear goal, that is to facilitate more cross-border transactions, and also to make it more transparent, all the processes related to international trade. So that's good. That's good for all the people that it's joining today now and trying to look at Argentina as a destination for doing businesses. So that's great. So I would like to thank you a lot for your great work. And I think we have some questions, but we already passed the time. So I'm taking notes of all the questions. Just don't worry, and then I can just send an email to everyone that is asking questions. So I'm seeing there some claps and some fingers up, also as a way of thanking you for your great presentation. And it was a real pleasure and honor to have you here, Carolina.
That's great. Thanks, Luciano. We are open to answer any question. I thought while I was talking that someone was asking about minerals. We have very rich reserves on copper and lithium, mainly among others. But I mean, we are open to answer any further question. You can send us written. You can share my email if you want. My email is almost a commodity, so I have no problem that you share it with anyone that has some question. We couldn't talk about Rishi because we didn't have time, but
we have a special session for that tomorrow. So we
oh,
will
that's
go
great.
deep
That's
into
great.
the Rigi that was mentioned a lot during all the other previous sessions. And tomorrow we will have a specific session about Rigi.
Okay, that's great. So I'm entirely at your disposal and all of the audience. Thanks for the invitation, and please feel free to share our contact details with anyone.
Absolutely. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much, Carolina.